really one of the biggest things that I would encourage everyone to think about is how do you be a better business partner? So I
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our FinPod podcast. Today, we are looking at careers in finance with none other than Bill Dillmeier. Bill, welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I am just so thrilled to have you on because not only do I think that our audience is going to have so much to learn from you, but I personally feel like I have so much to learn from you. And I'm really excited today to be sitting down and talking with you.
No, I'm as well. And it's been an amazing career that I'm sure we're going to be able to unpack over our time together. And it's a little bit atypical in places.
Which is the best story because honestly, the kind of like I went to school for finance and then I got an investment banking job or something very traditional right away. It's very linear and like a very traditional path, but those traditional paths, there's only so there's so very few of those spots to start with. And at the end of the day, it is everything else that is less linear that I find to be the most interesting because it allows people to relate the most. Because such a small pocket dues right know kind of right from when they graduate, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it for the rest of my career. The
Yeah.
vast majority don't have that right away. For example, I think the when I started off in investment banking as a fresh undergrad, I have one friend who is still at the bank to this day. And like, granted, he's a managing director now, but like, guess what? He is one amongst maybe like 20 or 30 of us that I knew. And so those stories, of course, are super interesting, but I love everything in and around it. Anything that is kind of like a permutation combination of. And so, with that said, I always like to open up this conversation with what is your career in finance kind of origin story? Did you go to school for it? Did you kind of find yourself in an accidental path? Was it very intentional? Like, tell us where it all kind of started for you.
No, great question. So for me, it was very intentional. I always knew from a young age that I wanted to be in finance. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. He started the family business back in the 30s, ran it until the day he passed away. And from there was always this tendency for me to drift towards finance. I will say, though, that I did have a brief conversation with my father, perhaps one of the most awkward conversations with my father when I told him I wanted to be an art history major. That was about a 5-minute conversation. But aside from that, it's always been finance. And
I had a friend that was an art history major, and today he is a corporate securities lawyer at Sidley Austin, a great law firm. But I find like art history majors are like very analytical.
yes, I mean, there's a lot to the aesthetic, but then there's also the provenance that goes with the picture and being ready to get in and do a lot of research. So it's not all just, memorizing history. There's a lot of nuance that you have to be able to bring to it. And especially when you start to try to price art and the subjectiveness of it as well.
And then so after that awkward conversation with your father, where did you decide to go? And what kind of came from there?
Sure. So I went to actually a small all business college in Massachusetts, just outside of Worcester. It's called Nichols College. But the great part was it was an all business curriculum, and they actually required incoming freshmen to have a laptop computer. This was actually one of the first colleges in America that was doing this. So they revamped the entire curriculum around that. So you would bring your laptop to class, and you had sort of a knockoff version of Excel and a knockoff version of Word, and you would do all of your presentations and all of your coursework online. And the great part, it was Division III, so I got to walk on, play some lacrosse, played some soccer. Actually, I started one of my first companies while I was still in college. I was actually selling custom silkscreen T-shirts door to door.
Why?
Yeah.
So like an entrepreneur from the very beginning.
Yes. Yeah. And, it was this very sort of classic kind of thing. I found a printer in the state of Maine who printed what I needed for, say $3 a unit. And then after dinner, load up a backpack and just start going door to door, seeing your friends and selling shirts for $12. And that's actually how I sort of bootstrapped, part of my way through college.
Gosh. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then, like, when you got towards the end of college, did you already have like a path in mind? You sound like you were a planner.
I would say I was a bit of a planner. I was, very purposeful. I knew it was going to be in finance. So after college in Massachusetts, I came back to the Philadelphia area where I had grown up and went to work for the Vanguard Group, the mutual fund company. And it was a tremendous experience. And most people know Vanguard for their mutual funds. I was there actually when they were building what was called Vanguard Brokerage. And there were probably about 25 to 30 of us in a traditional phone queue, but it was very much of an offset from the philosophy of Mr. Bogle, who was the grandfather of mutual funds. And we did this purely from a competitive advantage. Like we knew Fidelity had a brokerage arm. We knew Schwab was having a brokerage arm. So Vanguard built this almost begrudgingly to go ahead and give customers an outlet. So I was able to go get my Series 7, spent some time on the phones working with customers, then actually went and did a lot of back office work. So I was actually in charge of corporate actions. So rights, warrants, mergers, acquisitions. So actually I had a small team of folks who would actually reach out to our customers and get their decision of, did you want to tender your shares during this acquisition? Or how many rights did you want to potentially exercise from this mutual fund that you owned?
And did you find that? So I find it really interesting that your college experience sounds like so forward thinking. And even today, like, I don't really think, well, maybe today is different, but when I went to university, let's say like 2008, 9, um, the whole like idea of everything kind of being laptop based, learning how to do presentations, learning how to do data analysis, like working with Excel, PowerPoint, that was not really embedded into the curriculum. You'd kind of get a taste of it in certain courses like economics or one of those like it's not the right word to say like HR courses, but like people management courses. You'd have an opportunity to practice there. But it sounds like from the very beginning, you were very well prepared with the types of skills that you would need to succeed in an actual job. You learn very like applied skills.
Yes, very much. And that was part of the ethos of the college when they revamped the curriculum. I mean, we really only had, say, 5 or 6 majors. You're an accounting major, you're a finance major, you're an econ major. Like it was very straightforward, even like a general business major. So for us, it was a way to kind of work with people who are like minded and peers and be able to go ahead and exchange ideas. And yeah, it was definitely purposeful in the intent of how they had done that. And, you were talking about me being sort of a planner. One of my first jobs, I was actually still in high school. I was the assistant to the director of budgeting and planning for like an international plastics company and just picked up an early version of a spreadsheet program one day and just started playing with it. And I will tell you that I sort of stretched my qualifications during the job interview and was able to, go ahead, but I learned a ton. And Jim is still one of my mentors today. I spoke to him just a few months ago. He, and I look back on my career early and he's like, Bill, you had a special skill when I met you. And it's just a way to continue to go ahead and hone it along the
Oh
way.
my god. And you also like at the very beginning of your career, you also got a taste of people management, like from the get go.
Yes, from the beginning. And there were a lot of virtual teams, but it was even a better experience because I had to continue to seek volunteers, motivate these people, work through a list of customers that needed to be contacted on a relatively short notice to then be able to go ahead and turn around their responses.
A topic that I'm going to touch on throughout is like the one that you hit about mentorship. For me personally, I think mentorship is probably the most, um, it can be the most pivotal part of someone's career. Like it's not like a make or break, but it can really like kind of like throw you into the stratosphere. Like it can really, really amplify someone's potential when they meet the right people at the right time. Like for me, I've been very lucky that right out of university, I had an internship at a pension fund and I started there, but I also met amazing mentors and I still keep in touch with them today. I spoke to one actually this morning. His name is Kevin. Hi, Kevin, if you're listening. But they've known me since I was like 18, which is wild to think today I'm in my 30s. But they really helped me start my first kind of um, certainly my first real job in asset management and helped me move on to the sell side in investment banking. And so the power of a mentor is such an important topic that I want to touch on. And I want to touch on it as we go through your journey from Vanguard to where you are today, a founder of your own company, Aperture.
Right.
There's a lot that happened in between. And I would love for you to just take us through the whole journey.
Sure. And I can't agree with you more about the importance of a mentor. I mean, for me, I've had the same mentor probably for the past 15 years. He's been super pivotal. We'll get to him in my career. And he's the one that really helped me stretch and made me think about different ways to look at numbers, presentations. And right now, I'm actually giving back a lot as well. So I'm actually mentoring startups here in Seattle. There's an accelerator that just formed earlier this year. And I'm actually taking the first class through a number of different exercises, doing one-on-ones with some of the founders to really continue to give back. Because I think that's where, like you said, you get so much more career acceleration from finding the right mentor at the right time.
And one quick sidebar. I know I said at the very beginning, I was like, I know that our listeners have so much to learn from you and me personally as well. But one of the reasons why, like, apart from like just meeting you right away and feeling that, I was just thinking, okay, obviously from his LinkedIn profile, I could see that he's giving back. Like, and he's got a ton of experience, but to see that he's actually giving back to the community locally is so, it's kind of what CFI is all about in a very different way. But the continuous learning aspect and being a lifelong learner and then being a teacher is just so, like, I think it's just so admirable. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, I completely agree. It is all about lifelong learning. And there's actually a book. It's a parable. It's actually called The Go Giver Principle.
Oh, the go giver.
Yes. And really it's about, that principle of giving more than you're taking and always be thinking about how you can help someone else before you help yourself. And it's kind of you can call it karma or the universe working with you, but as you put more out, it comes back to you. And being able to go ahead and, touch one person who can introduce you to someone and be able to unlock that next door. So it's a great philosophy to begin to draw from.
Okay, so then I want to go back into your journey from Vanguard.
From Vanguard.
From Vanguard to Aperture. So many chapters in between.
Yes. So from Vanguard, I went to work for Morgan Stanley Institutional Mutual Fund. So I was actually working for a boutique mutual fund company. Number of very smart individuals from Wharton, really enjoyed sitting around and talking about money and investing. And one day someone said, well, why don't you put literally your money where your mouth is and start managing my money? And then they started building, and they had pension funds, they had high net worth individuals. So they were building quite a portfolio. And they ultimately realized that they were getting too big and needed to scale. So they picked up the phone and called Morgan Stanley and said, we're ready to sell ourselves. And the deal was done, within 2 weeks. But my role was to actually come in and work for the president of the mutual fund company. I was doing advisory work on board reporting, the state of mutual funds, and how to continue to go ahead and help the company be more streamlined and much more effective. But most of my work was around board reporting. So really had two different lenses. The first lens was who has the same investment philosophy as us and what are their returns? So if you're an actively managed equity fund, who has that same doctrine and are they getting better returns than us? Which then kind of calls into account the effectiveness, the efficacy of the portfolio manager. The other side of that was who in the institutional space charges um, the same that we do for fees. And it's a way to actually compare and contrast fees. So if I'm an actively managed bond fund, for example, do I need 37 basis points? Do I need 50 basis points? And really it was a way for portfolio managers to continue to look at how much they're charging. Are they charging too much? Or in some cases, they're charging too little and can actually raise fees across the board. And for me, I sat down one day with, Morningstar and was just going through each of the funds, reading the investment philosophy, reaching out to the team to get prospectuses, and then begin to say, okay, this is how it's similar, this is how it's not similar, because some of the investment theories that this boutique was following were a little narrow. It was like, we only buy investment grade bonds, but not the lowest tranche. But we can also buy bonds that are in Asia. And it was like trying to go ahead and find that was actually pretty challenging at times, but it was a tremendous experience to work with some amazing fund managers and really look at mutual funds as a business.
And when you went from Vanguard to kind of Morgan Stanley,
Mhm.
were you very kind of like intentional about those moves? And were you always kind of building towards kind of, I guess, where you are today at Aperture?
It was
Or was
always
it more so like the network that you had and kind of like the mentorship that you received and the opportunities that were available at the time that just kind of seemed to align?
Actually, it was very much of the latter. I had a strong network at Vanguard. And as people sort of, you were talking about like in your starting class in investment bank, as my starting class continued to mature their career, it was a natural progression to go from retail to institutional. So they reached out to me and said, hey, we have an amazing opportunity here at Morgan Stanley Institutional. You should come check it out. And it was a great way just to kind of up level my game, see that next layer. But I knew I was always laddering towards something bigger. And I was very much enjoying the financial services momentum at the time. There was so much, free capital coming into the market, so much great economic tailwinds that were happening. And you had, the best place to be was honestly in the market.
And then from then, you have several other steps that you took to be where you are today.
Mhm.
And they're similar, but they're quite different from where you started. For example, like right
Mhm.
now, for me, I've never quite understood like the go-to-market space as it's not my area of expertise. But you've also dabbled in like audit, and there's so many other facets of it.
Mhm.
Take us through the next step after Morgan Stanley.
Sure. After Morgan Stanley, actually, I spent a good bit of time in mortgage banking. So I actually used to call Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. I was building mortgage-backed securities and then trading them forward. So on a monthly basis, I delivered about $1 billion a month into the open market.
And that's
And
when it was the dawn of MBS.
exactly, this is the late um, late 90s, early 2000s when
So
the
yeah,
market
the
was
times are still good.
times were still great. There was a lot of flow, a lot of demand, and I mean, it was at times you have to catch yourself. You're 20 something, and you're like, "Hey, this is Bill. Can I get a bid on 50 million Fannie Mae 6.5 March delivery?" And you're just in and out, but that's what you just kind of that was what you did to be able to go ahead and keep the engine moving. But my job was strictly to move as many mortgages that were available for sale into a pool, tie them to a security, and then deliver that security out to the market.
And this is going to be a more broad question, but and I kind of already know the answer. But have you taken any like intentional pauses during your career where you've decided like, okay, like I kind of want to pivot, I want to switch directions, and yeah, I'm just going to take a break and just figured out a new path? Or has it
Um,
always been one connection to the next connection and then going forward?
no, actually, I would say that there was definitely a pause. I did some independent consulting on my own. I was actually working and commuting to a job in Portland, Oregon, which is about 4 hours south from here. So every other week, I was on the train to Portland. I was out Monday, back Friday, and then I did the off week working here in Seattle. And after doing that for a number of years, I had that sort of weird feeling of when I was here, I wanted to be there. And when I was there, I wanted to be here. And so I took a pause to basically go ahead and say, I'd like to be a solopreneur for a little bit and continue to explore some new options. So I was working, but at the same time, I was working much more from my own schedule. But it was definitely a pause that I needed just to kind of take it all in and think about what that next ladder was going to be.
Yeah, and like I always kind of bring this topic up because I think now more than ever, people are generally fast paced. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of it is just because there is so much more information available at everyone's fingertips. And so it makes, for example, like job opportunities, it makes it a lot easier for people to get educated on what a job is, what the role is, what the qualifications are, and as well to be prepared to be able to go and introduce yourself for that role. So everything is hyper competitive, and it makes it very difficult to take everything in. And so a lot of, I think, our subscriber base at CFI find that, when you're in a career in finance, it's like you have to constantly be on it, on it, on it. And when you do that, kind of makes people always ask the questions like, how do you balance your life? And for you, have you ever found yourself too immersed in work? Because it's very clear to me that you are a highly ambitious, entrepreneurial, um, self-starting person, and from a very young age. And as you kind of have that kind of energy naturally, I find that those people generally are very successful, but also it you have to make room for other parts of your life too. And it's always a question that I get from people, which is just so like this person has all of this amazing resume and great experience professionally, but how do they balance? Like, how do they balance their life?
No, that's such a great question. And it's something that I think so many professionals grapple with, no matter where they are in their career, whether you're early, mid, or even in that later stage. For me, yes, I did find myself in that position. I was working for Bill Gates for a time. He owned a media company here in Seattle. And we used to compete head to head with Getty Images in the stock photography market. But we had offices around the world. So I could wake up at 7, talk to my team in Europe. Late afternoon comes. Oh, guess what? My Asia Pac team is now online. And the CFO who I worked closely with used to travel the world and at times asked me to work the time zone he was in. So if he was in China, I was working the night shift, or 10 p.m. Seattle time is roughly 5 a.m. London
Oh
time.
my gosh, it's like, Phil, travel with me.
Oh, trust me, I tried to, yes, cut that short, so that we wouldn't have to, work all of that. And that's where it did become a little bit overwhelming. And for me, the outlet for me is the virtue of living here in the Pacific Northwest. You can get out and hike at any time, almost all year round. So for me, getting out into nature, seeing things in their very common element, and for me, bringing my camera. Like I like to use my camera to be able to slow down and capture like moments and seconds, because it's just you and the frame that you're taking at that second. And it's a way to be able to go ahead and have that pause and that built-in moment to say, I'm here, I'm present. And, sometimes you actually have to set your breathing as well, like when you're taking that picture, so that,
Oh
you're
my
not
gosh.
too herky jerky.
And so a passion of yours is photography.
Correct.
And if and I guess like the complement of like your personal passion is, what would you say is your passion professionally today? Is it the same thing as it was when you were back at Vanguard, or has it kind of transformed as you've grown over time?
Oh, it's definitely transformed over time. So right now, I think I'm doing some of the best work in my entire career right now because of what I've been able to go ahead and build over that story arc from Vanguard. So right now it is about working with really either venture capital backed, VC backed, PE backed startups to be able to go ahead and build that next generation of company. I mean, to some degree, like from a kind of a soundbite perspective, like I think of myself as almost like a strategic growth architect. So I can come in and then talk about how do we achieve strategic growth? There's the financial way, there's go to market, there's customer success, there's a lot of different levers that you can pull along the way. And how can I be just a part of that team to be able to drive the architecture?
How did you, but like, where did you get that type of knowledge?
That's a great question. So for me, we're going to kind of circle back to mentors. So when I was at Corbis, I was the first finance hire of a turnaround expert CFO. And this is when we were going through a true digital transformation. So we were going from film negatives to digital imagery. And how do you then begin to bridge getting images on the web in a high velocity, low cost manner? And I was running global FP&A, trying to be able to go ahead and do almost like a classic brick and mortar to the web type of business model. And through that, I learned a lot about myself, how to do business internationally. But one day, my mentor and CFO came to me. He's like, Bill, I want you to be a little bit more immersed in the business. You now run global sales operations. So in addition to, thinking about it financially, now it's okay, you now have a team in London, Paris, Milan, and Dusseldorf in Europe. And now you also have folks in 6 countries in Asia. And you're now thinking about sales comp, how much the quota is going to be for your territories. How do you think about gaining market share, account planning? So that was really one of those first forays into looking at the lens of the business, not just as the finance guy, but thinking about it much more as an operator, and then coming at it and saying, if you don't understand cash flow, you don't understand the lifeblood of the business. And being embedded was that first step to kind of getting to where I am now.
And it's a very, very different thing to be like, working at a financial institution in capital markets to then be in finance or a finance role at a company, especially from like an operator perspective. It's so different.
Yep.
But it's like, it's also complementary in the sense that, at least for me, I found that what I do today, I guess, is actually like very intimately related to what I did in investment banking, because I was in capital markets and we're creating courses for things in modeling valuations and capital market securities. But I found that what I always tell others that I learned from my first kind of role, and it's been a very formative experience, is the work ethic. That's what I really took away from my first few years on the sell side, is that it taught me very quickly what professionalism was. There was a very high bar that needed to be met every day. And did I meet it every day? No, probably, especially not in the beginning. But I certainly tried my best. But it gave me that, okay, like, I would never be able to do this again. I don't know how I did it back then, but okay, like 5 a.m., like I am up, like I've already had my coffee. I'm going to go to the gym when they like pull open the trailer,
Right.
exercise, take a full shower, get ready, be at my desk by 7 a.m., listen to morning calls, like our overnight Asia desk and all of this kind of stuff. And that kind of very early on set the tone of like, what does hard work really mean? And that really helped me throughout my career.
Yep.
For me, it's so interesting to see how people that start off at financial institutions end up at such different places, but are all so like high achieving and successful in very different ways. It's like a completely different place where you started, but it's just like that work ethic that carries you forward.
Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to is, some people are born with that work ethic. Sometimes you have to kind of develop it like a muscle. But there's your early formative years, like you said, getting up at 5, having that discipline is really what it takes to give you that endurance. Because I always tell people, if you think about it this way, we're all athletes, whether we're a professional tennis player or we work in finance. You have a finite amount of energy every day when you wake up. How do you go ahead and optimize that energy to get the greatest degree of impact in your day is really the most important thing. And focusing on the right things is something that you learn over time. And you learn that you may hear something in the past or in the ether, but it might not take hold. And you have to be ready to go ahead and separate that noise to continue to focus and drive.
And what you're describing is exactly what you do in like a strategic role today, like helping companies scale up and strategically drive their growth. That is exactly what we're describing as an athlete there.
Exactly. I mean, there's always you'll say like the shiny penny, or there's always a founder who's like, well, I want to do this and this. And we're like, why don't we get thing number one perfected before we think about thing number two? And limiting what my friend would always say is the amount of surface area that you're trying to cover. And making sure that you're very direct and intentional with that surface area. And so, for example, one of the things that my first software company did was this company in Portland, Oregon. It's called JAMA Software. They make requirements management software. That was their sole focus. We had a small professional services arm by definition just to support our customers, but we knew that wasn't our bread and butter. We knew that we didn't want to continue to stretch out of our Gartner quadrant. Like, we were trying to be very deliberate about building a tool that would compete with IBM's product called Doors. And that's all we did. And we never wavered from that. And, when I was there, we were able to get from 8 million to over 20 million in a year and a half in ARR, predominantly through Fortune 1000 companies and a dedicated sales staff, and continue to grow the business and hone it. And earlier this year, the company sold for $1.2 billion to a private equity firm in San Francisco.
Oh, wow. What would you say, like in your role today, what is your favorite part of your role?
Oh gosh. For me, it's the diversity of sort of waking up every day and knowing that you could be doing 3-4 different things, and it's an opportunity to learn. And you could be thinking about how to go ahead and build a go-to-market motion that is effective and meets the needs of the company, to, okay, I needed to build a sensitivity analysis for the next 36 months based on these inputs, and then be able to turn that around and get back to the investors because it's budget season. So for me, if you're not evolving and changing every day, it gets really boring.
And then with your, when you describe the different ways that a company can grow, there's go to market, customer service, and a couple others you listed. And of those, is there a particular topic that like most excites you, that you most like to kind of work in?
For me, it's go to market. So as you know, there's always that sort of healthy friction between finance and sales. And don't get me wrong, I love salespeople. So the first thing that I'll usually say to a CRO is, I want to make you the richest man in the building. But to get you there, it's going to have to come at efficient growth. I'm not going to buy my revenue. I'm not going to pay your sales team, extra, because if not, you create this very vicious sort of cycle between a dollar of revenue comes in and it goes back out in sales commissions. And with that happening, you don't get a chance to invest into the business.
And for our listeners that don't know what GTM, go to market, is, what is go to market?
So go to market is sort of the flow in which leads would come into the funnel from marketing. Those leads would then be distilled down into, say, qualified leads. And then those leads are then taken over by a sales team to be able to go through a sales process. So you'll hear Salesforce will probably give you like a 7-stage funnel to be able to help your customer go on that journey. And building the efficiency between how many leads do I bring in to how many customers actually close one in Salesforce is really the essence of go to market. So you have to be as much listening to what is resonating from a marketing perspective to how well is my sales team equipped to be able to go ahead and close a deal. And you rely on some really key players in that process, sales enablement, sales trainers, to be able to go ahead and keep your sales team sharp to help them work the customer through the funnel to deliver that optimum amount of value, to working with a marketing team to help them understand customer preferences, use data from your close lost reasons. Like you'll find probably, at least a third of your customers are not going to go on that journey with you. What can you glean from that to then be able to be a better marketer, to then be able to drive that process to be a little bit more efficient?
Wow. And this, your current role is very much what we would say is kind of like an individual contributor in the sense that you're an entrepreneur, but you have managed teams very early on. And what has been your favorite type of role? Or have you really enjoyed the aspect of being an individual contributor to a team? I remember in capital markets, like we were all on a desk, like a fixed income desk. But I would always say, like, okay, we have a head of the desk, but he's like the ultimate leader of individual contributors. There's very little people management. Um, and so I found that generally people in finance typically thrive off individual contributor type of work. And when I see someone that has that personality of, I'm a strong individual contributor, I'm very self motivated, but I also like people and I really enjoy managing them. I always love to get an understanding of which one do you like more, and like how did you actually come about like building that muscle of people management, because being an entrepreneur means that you are not only a great manager of people ultimately, but you're a manager of growth, you're a manager of yourself, and there's so many aspects that go into it.
No, that's a super thoughtful question. Um, Being an individual contributor, I think, gives you the opportunity to learn the process from end to end and become a domain expert. And for me, if I were to have staff, I would be able to give them the greatest degree of insight and the nuances to the role. There's nothing worse than coming into a team and not really having a playbook or a reference point to be able to jump into. So growing your skills as an individual contributor and then bringing on a team is that great 1-2 combination, because you get to do mentoring, you get to do a lot of knowledge transfer, and so much of that unwritten process that goes on within the organization. And being an IC in a finance role, really one of the biggest things that I would encourage everyone to think about is, how do you be a better business partner? So I very much say that I've worked for the head of sales, the head of marketing, the head of product. Those people contribute to my performance review every year. Those people determine, how I stand in the organization when I get promoted or compensated, and really understanding how to be influential and have executive presence, as if it were, is as much of an important skill as being a team leader. So you have to be ready to play, a little bit of, if you're thinking about in like terms of tennis, you have to be ready to play singles and doubles, depending on the audience that you're working with.
Oh my God, I love that analogy. And then one of the things that I like to open up is if you could give Bill 10 years ago a piece of advice, what would it be? And what would it be and why? Like, what would you like to give anyone who's listening today? A piece of advice or a nugget, soundbite of encouragement. What would it be?
Oh, always keep exploring, always be a lifelong learner. And what you're doing today will not get you to tomorrow. So you have to be ready to push yourself to be able to learn new skills. I mean, look at the emergence of AI. And, if you're
Oh,
not at
yeah.
least dabbling in AI, you're going to be falling behind. There's already um, GPTs that are out there that are doing finance work where you could load an income statement, balance sheet, and it'll give you rudimentary mock-ups that you can just fill in commentary for. And the technology is just going to continue to get better. So embrace it. And I would always say, don't ever turn down an opportunity to stretch yourself in a new project.
And we both value mentorship, I think, so much. And I hope that, as much as I mentor people today, my mentees, I think, are people that I've typically worked for me, which are kind of more out of university, a couple of years in the workforce. But I know how important that was to me when I was younger. Um, but for those of us that are listening that don't necessarily have a mentor right now, um, but again, you touched on the advent of ChatGPT and AI. It might sort of be the ultimate mentor in weird ways. For those that don't have a Bill in their network, what would you say to them to keep them moving forward and just give them any type of encouragement and motivation?
Gosh. You are correct. There are a lot of online tools, but people want are honestly flattered when someone comes to me and says, "Will you be my mentor?" I'm like, I think of it as an honor and a privilege. So if you're in a company and you don't think you have a mentor, if you were to ask somebody, there's a 99% chance that they're going to say yes because they know the importance of giving back. They probably had a mentor, and it can start super informally. Doesn't have to be some type of rigid program, but as simple as, "Hey, can we go have coffee for 20 minutes?" To at least, have those nuggets and talk to as many different people across different disciplines. Like some of the greatest knowledge I've had has come from talking to the head of business intelligence and thinking about how they're seeing data and allowing me to test drive ideas on, "Hey, can I get a data set that does this?" And that is, a way to continue to foster mentorships. People want to talk about themselves. So just always look for that opportunity.
Oh my gosh. That is the perfect way to close our podcast. I can't think of a more encouraging way. And honestly, anyone that is listening today, like if you for some reason feel like you are kind of like lacking that real mentorship that you think would help you make the next step, take a chance, just as Bill is saying. It's like whoever you are surrounded by, whether you're in school or whether you are currently starting your first job, there's always that person in the seat next to you. Reach out, have quick coffees. Like that's how careers, not in finance, but in any field, that's how careers begin. And so if I can also say give one piece of advice as well, it's always be as Bill said, be open. Like that's as brief as I can be. It's like be open to new opportunities, be open to new conversations, be open to trying out new ways to build your network. And so, with that, that is a close on our careers in finance interview with Bill today. And I hope that everyone has enjoyed this podcast, and I will see you all next time very soon.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. FinPod is brought to you by Corporate Finance Institute, the #1 rated online provider of finance and banking training, certifications, and productivity tools.